Imagine standing right at the crossroads of global finance and power. You've got two titans squaring off, and the stakes, well, they're literally your wallet and, the whole shape of the world economy.
That's really not an exaggeration. That's pretty much the scene unfolding as we speak.
Exactly. And we're about to do a deep dive into this high-stakes economic drama that's been ramping up all around us. It's a major clash between the U.S. and, well, the increasingly formidable BRICS nations.
Yeah, formidable is the right word.
This isn't just some minor squabble. It feels like a direct challenge to the global financial order we've, well, kind of taken for granted for decades.
And we've really spent time getting into the heart of this whole situation, sifting through the latest news, the developments, trying to understand not just what's happening, but why it actually matters to, well, everyone listening.
Right.
So we're going to unpack the threats, the counter moves, and I mean the real implications for trade, for prices, maybe even for the currency sitting in your pocket.
Our mission here is just to cut through all the noise, give you a really clear picture of what's going on at this pretty pivotal moment in global economics.
Exactly. No spin, just the facts and the potential fallout.
Because this isn't some, abstract economic debate happening far away. It's got real dates, real places, real money on the line. We've been watching it super closely. And yeah, we're ready to share what we found.
Okay, let's do it.
So let's unpack this global game of economic chess. Where do we even start?
Well, let's start right now. It's July 7th, 2025.
Right, today.
And there's this specific economic tension that's, you could say it's reached a fever pitch.
Okay. And we've got confirmation now, right, that President Trump intends to start sending out those tariff letters, the actual country-by-country rates and agreements.
That's the word. As early as today. So this isn't just talk anymore. It's not hypothetical. It's, tangible action.
And it comes right after that big summit just wrapped up in Rio de Janeiro.
Exactly. The timing is definitely not a coincidence. It really sets the stage.
It absolutely does. So talk us through the immediate threat here. What's on the table right now?
Okay, so the key thing to grasp is this proposed additional 10% tariff. And it's not across the board.
Right.
It's specifically aimed at countries the administration sees as aligning with BRICS or adopting policies that President Trump has called anti-American.
Okay, so targeted.
Very targeted. But look, to really get the weight of this, you got to remember the earlier warnings. Much more dramatic stuff.
I mean, back in January, February?
Yeah, exactly. Back then, Trump was talking about, a staggering 100% tariff.
100%.
100%. If BRICS even dared to undermine the U.S. dollar, that wasn't just noise. It was a clear warning shot.
So connecting the dots here, the big goal is what? Keeping the dollar on top.
Absolutely. It's crystal clear the overarching objective is preserving the dollar's global economic hegemony. Its dominant control over international finance.
That 100% threat, though? I mean, how serious was that really? Was it just political bluster, or did it, carry real weight, especially given where the dollar stands?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Or maybe the trillion-dollar question. Look, the 100% figure was certainly designed to shock.
Definitely did that.
Right. But it really highlights the deep, deep concern in Washington about any challenge to the dollar. You have to remember, the U.S. dollar, right now, accounts for over 58% of global foreign exchange reserves.
15%. Wow.
Yeah, it's huge. And that's not just a number. It gives the U.S. immense financial leverage.
How so? Like, what does that actually mean in practice?
Well, think about it. It influences global borrowing costs. It lets the U.S. dictate terms in lots of international trade deals. It provides a pretty significant degree of financial stability, relatively speaking, for the U.S. itself. So any erosion of that dominance, that could fundamentally reshape geopolitical power. It could really diminish U.S. financial influence around the world. So even if 100% was maybe extreme signaling, the underlying intent to protect the dollar's supremacy, that's very, very real.
Gotcha. Okay. And the BRICS nations, they haven't just sat back quietly, have they?
Not at all. They've responded loud and clear.
And it's important to remember BRICS isn't just the original five anymore. Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa.
Right. They've expanded. Now you've got Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, the UAE. It's a much bigger bloc now.
A really formidable bloc representing a huge chunk of the global population and the economy, too.
Absolutely.
And their big annual summit, the 17th one, just finished up July 6th in Rio.
That's right.
And they came out with a unified voice. They adopted this thing called the Rio Declaration. What did that say?
Well, it voiced serious concerns That's the diplomatic language. Serious concerns about unilateral tariffs and these non-tariff measures.
Unilateral meaning, one country acting alone, like the U.S. potentially is here.
Precisely, yeah. And they didn't just express concern. They explicitly criticized these actions as being inconsistent with WTO rules.
The World Trade Organization, the
Yeah.
body that's supposed to govern this stuff?
Supposed to, yes. And they went further, strongly reiterating their support for a rules-based multilateral trading system. Everyone agreeing on the rules together.
So this declaration wasn't just like polite diplomatic talk.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
By hitting those points, criticizing unilateral moves, backing the established rules, they were positioning themselves as the defenders of that system. It was a direct counter-narrative to the policies they see coming out of the U.S.
Interesting positioning. And China, obviously a huge player in BRICS. How did they specifically respond?
Yeah, China's response was pretty noteworthy. Came through their spokeswoman, Mao Ning, also on July 7th. Very clear message. BRICS is not seeking confrontation.
Okay.
Instead, she said, they advocate for openness, inclusivity, and win-win cooperation. But, and this is important, they also issued a warning, saying, quote, trade and tariff wars have no winners and protectionism offers no way forward. Pretty blunt.
Yeah, that's direct.
And it's not just talk. It's backed up by their strategic moves. China's been pushing trade alternatives for a while now, actively promoting using the RMB, their currency, for exchanges, developing the ECNY, the digital yuan.
Right, the digital currency.
Exactly, all specifically aimed at reducing dependency on the U.S. dollar. This isn't new, but it shows their long-term strategic thinking. It's a shift away from dollar reliance that's been, years in the making.
That focus on the ECNY and the RMB, that leads us straight into this whole de-dollarization debate within BRICS, doesn't it?
It absolutely does. It's not a new idea, but boy, it seems to be gaining serious momentum now.
We've seen them pushing for trade in their own currencies, right? Like yuan, rupee, and deals between themselves.
Yeah, lots of bilateral agreements are moving that way, trying to bypass the dollar where they can.
And here's where it gets really interesting. They're even talking about potentially developing a collective BRICS currency.
That's the big one.
I mean, think about that. A direct challenge to the dollar's long-standing dominance, the very thing Trump has vowed to protect so fiercely. But, okay, realistically, what are the biggest hurdles to actually creating a BRICS currency? And how long could that even take to challenge the dollar?
Yeah, that's a critical point because the ambition is one thing. The reality is another entirely. The path is full of challenges.
Like what?
Okay, well, biggest hurdles. Finding a peg or a basket of currencies everyone agrees on. Establishing a really robust, independent financial infrastructure for settlements that's massive. And just navigating the huge economic differences, the different political priorities among the members themselves.
Yeah, you've got very different economies and political systems there. India, China, Brazil, Russia.
Exactly. A collective currency needs immense trust. It needs transparent governance. It needs countries to be willing to give up some of their own national monetary control, which is a huge ask for such diverse nations.
Okay, so it's not happening overnight.
Definitely not. Look, discussions are happening, but fully working BRICS currency that could actually challenge the dollar's dominance, that's likely a very long-term project. Think decades, probably, not years.
So the immediate focus is more on just trading in their own currencies between themselves.
That seems to be the more practical near-term goal, increasing that bilateral trade in local currencies, step by step.
Okay, so stepping back, what does all this tension, these tariffs, these currency discussions, what does it mean for the economy, both here in the U.S. and, globally?
Yeah, we have to look at the projections. There was that analysis from the Peterson Institute for International Economics, PIE, came out back in March 11th.
Right, I remember seeing that. What did it say?
Well, it painted a pretty stark picture of the potential fallout for the U.S. economy if these tariffs are fully implemented.
How stark.
Their research suggested U.S. GDP could be, get this, $432 billion lower by the end of Trump's potential second term.
$432 billion lower. Oof.
Yeah. And on top of that, consumer prices, they could rise by about 1.6%.
Okay, 1.6%. So how does that actually hit people? Explain that.
Well, typically, when tariffs are put on imports, it's the company importing the goods that pays the tax to the government.
Right. Yeah.
But they rarely just eat that cost. Often they pass it straight on to consumers through higher prices, or if they do absorb it, it squeezes their profits, which can lead to other issues.
So for people listening, that 1.6% rise isn't just some abstract number.
Not at all. It means everything from, your morning coffee if the beans are imported to a new car if parts come from overseas. It could all cost subtly but significantly more.
And that adds up fast in a household budget.
It really does. So it raises that fundamental question: who actually ends up paying the price in these big economic battles?
Good question. And while these tariffs clearly could cost U.S. consumers, what's the argument for them? Do proponents say there are benefits, maybe for American industries? Is there another side to this?
Oh, absolutely. There's always another side to the economic argument. Proponents will often argue that tariffs protect domestic industries, shield them from cheaper foreign competition.
Right, the idea being it encourages local production, saves jobs here.
Exactly. The thinking is, if you make imported goods more expensive, people will buy the American-made alternative instead, boosting the national economy.
Okay.
They might also say it's a necessary tool, to force other countries to the negotiating table for fair trade deals, or to stop what they see as unfair practices like dumping or subsidies.
So short-term pain for consumers, maybe, but the goal is long-term strength for national industries.
That's often how it's framed, yes. Strengthening national industries, becoming more self-reliant. It's a classic economic debate, really, with strong points on both sides.
Okay. But it's definitely not just the U.S. feeling the impact, right? The BRICS countries, they'd face problems too.
For sure. It's certainly not a one-way street. BRICS nations, many of them are heavily reliant on exports, so they would face significant economic challenges too.
Like what kind of challenges?
Well, you could see higher prices for the goods they import. Fewer jobs, potentially, because if their exports drop, those industries suffer, and just generally slower economic growth across the board.
So it ripples through their economies too.
Definitely. In fact, the BRICS finance ministers themselves acknowledged this. They talked about how this situation brings uncertainty into international economic and trade activities, and that uncertainty itself can slow down global growth.
Yeah, uncertainty is never good for business. It really does sound like a double-edged sword hitting both sides in this standoff.
It really is, and if you look closer, you see how each BRICS member has slightly different stakes in this,
Yeah.
which probably complicates their unified response sometimes.
How so? Give us an example.
Okay, take India. India's trying to walk this fine line, right? Balancing strong ties with the U.S., but also being a key member of BRICS.
Right. Strategic autonomy, they call it sometimes.
Exactly. They're understandably wary of getting caught in the crossfire. It could really jeopardize their economic growth, their geopolitical standing. They don't want to be forced to choose sides if they can avoid it.
Makes sense. What about Brazil? They just hosted the summit.
Brazil's heavily focused on its commodity exports. Think agricultural stuff like coffee, soybeans, also raw materials. These sectors are super sensitive to global trade disruptions and tariffs. Any fluctuation hits them hard.
Okay. And then you have Russia and China. They seem to have maybe different motivations driving them here.
Very different, yeah. Russia, which is already dealing with a whole load of Western sanctions,
Right.
sees BRICS as a really crucial counterweight, a platform to push back against Western influence, exert its own economic and political leverage, and kind of challenge that isolation. It fits their geopolitical strategy perfectly.
And China.
Well, China is undeniably the powerhouse economically within the group. They're driving a lot of the agenda. Their constant push for using the RMB in trade, exploring alternatives to the SWIFT banking system.
SWIFT being the main global network for bank transactions.
Exactly, that network that lets banks send money messages securely. China looking for alternatives shows their long-term goal. They want to reshape the global financial architecture, reduce reliance on systems dominated by the U.S.
So yeah, each country has its own angle, its own vulnerabilities, its own vision for where this is all going. It's complex.
Super complex. It's not a monolithic block in terms of interests, even if they present a unified front on some issues.
So bringing it all together, what does this mean for the future? Is this the start of something permanent? Are these definitive actions that are going to fundamentally change global trade? Or is it, just a really aggressive negotiation tactic, political posturing?
That is the big question hanging in the air, isn't it? Precedent or posturing.
Yeah.
What's particularly interesting, I think, is that BRICS seems really determined to stand firm. They're sticking to their collective stance against protectionism, pushing for a more multipolar global trade system.
Multipolar meaning not just one dominant power like the U.S. has been.
Exactly. A system with multiple centers of power. And they're not just talking. They're aiming to reform institutions like the IMF, the International Monetary Fund.
Which helps manage global financial stability.
Right. They want more say there. They want to influence major currency valuations. This commitment seems to go beyond just reacting to tariffs.
Yeah.
It feels like it's about fundamentally trying to shift the balance of economic power globally.
So they're pushing for a system where emerging economies just have a bigger voice at the table.
That seems to be the goal, a more balanced international system.
And this whole dynamic, this escalating tension, plus the de-dollarization talk, it really could reshape international trade, couldn't it? Maybe lead to a genuinely new economic order.
It certainly could. The potential is there. The ripples from what's happening in Rio, in Washington, they could genuinely touch every corner of the globe,
How?
affecting prices, jobs, even the stability of entire nations. It's a big deal.
Yeah. This deep dive really shows, I think, that what we're watching isn't just about tariffs. That's almost the surface level. It's really about power, about influence. It's about the blueprint for global trade and finance for, well, decades to come.
It's a really complex picture. Deep roots, far-reaching consequences.
Absolutely.
And, this raises a really important question to think about. As the world tries to navigate all these shifts, how might these really high-stakes economic fights actually redefine the whole concept of a global reserve currency? I mean, what could that mean for just everyday economic stability far beyond these specific tariff headlines we're seeing right now? Are we heading towards a world with several major reserve currencies, or will one just replace another?
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely something to really mull over, isn't it? What does a reserve currency even mean in the future?
Exactly. Food for thought.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into a story that is clearly still very much unfolding right before our eyes.